let's get started. We're going to talk about burnout, everyone's favorite topic for Saturday morning. But the fact that we have so many people in this room means that you are not alone in feeling this. In fact, this was one of the most popular sessions that people signed up for, which I think says something in and of itself. So one of the things we really wanted to do today is just kind of share our stories and let everyone know that there's a real problem here, and we'll try to find some solutions together. I'll introduce myself first. I'm Lizzie Breyer Bowman. I'm on the board of Minnestar, who puts on this fabulous event. I'm also the VP of Marketing at Lemonada Media. We are a podcast company, and we happen to have just put out a podcast on burnout in the last year. So I learned a little bit about this topic. I have some firsthand experience with it as well. I'll let my fabulous panelists introduce themselves as well, and then we'll get into some stories of our own, and we'll definitely make sure we leave some time for you guys to ask some questions at the end as well.
Hi, I'm Tony Collen. I'm a software engineer, and I've been in tech for like 20 years or so, and worked everywhere from SiriusXM, freelancing, and health partners, and all sorts of companies. So I've been around.
I am Cortney Rasmussen. I am currently front-end software developer at Recuro Health. Previously, I was a consultant for a couple of years where I experienced most of my burnout. And I've been in the software industry for, over 10 years now. I'm not going to do the math.
Hi, I'm Tammy Livingston, and I work in operations. I've been a project manager, a product manager, and I've been in tech, mostly at pretty small tech companies for, I think like Tony, like 20 years. So, yeah, I think that's
awesome. Well, the World Health Organization officially defines burnout as an occupational phenomenon that comes as a result of chronic workplace stress that has not been successfully managed. But I think what we all know is it looks a little different, and it shows up a little different, and it feels a little different from all of us, but it's one of those things that you kind of know it when you're going through it, or you might not realize it until you sort of hit rock bottom. So I think let's start out by just letting each of us tell our story of what it felt like when we felt like we were experiencing burnout. So we can kind of go down the road, but I'd love to hear, like, how did you experience burnout? What does it feel like? What were your warning signs? What happened?
Okay, I'll go first. It was kind of a slow creeping thing. I don't know if anybody else has kind of seen that. And it's almost like you don't know what's happening until it's like really bad. So yeah, raise your hand if you've seen have that happen. Yeah, it was how I experienced burnout.
Yeah.
I gotta think about that actually. There's a lot to it. So as a software engineer, just like the fact that I hated working with computers all of a sudden, and like I didn't want to like touch a computer, like that was like a big thing for me. I've got like some open source software where it was my pandemic project, and I was super into it during COVID. And then more recently, as I got more and more burned out, it was just like I had like zero passion or interest in like working on this stuff, like in addition to my job. And yeah, getting migraines that I never had before and stuff like that. So it was all these little bits and pieces, and then mixed with huge signs of like, oh yeah, like I can't see because I'm having a migraine, things like that.
Yeah, I feel like I didn't really realize it until after the fact, which I think just I was going to therapy, and just through talking through kind of what I was experiencing, and like I just didn't care. I just wasn't going to meetings. I was like, it wasn't really it just was like, I don't want to do this, but I wanted to. And so that was the weird part, where it felt like really extremely difficult to like do my job that I wanted to do, but I just like couldn't do it. I think half the reason, so I was working in a really corporate office, and we switched over. It was kind of when COVID happened, and so I think that's also been a big piece of it as well, just like managing the work that we were doing previously in office, and then all of a sudden switching to work from home. And then I think it was a lot of meetings and a lot of like almost pointless. Everything kind of felt pointless and started to feel more pointless. And then I was like at that point where it was really hard to just like, why am I even doing this? And like questioning that, even though I wanted to do it. I don't know if you have anything to add.
Yeah, I think my experience maybe was a little bit different in that I think I really bought into kind of in the like mid-aughts, there was this thing about being a part of startup culture where you work hard, you play hard, and that meant that I was in some way either working hard or playing hard, attached to my job all the time. And that is like somewhere inside me, I don't think I was like conscious of it, but I believed that being always available and willing to jump in, and even if I was packing up my bag and ready to go, like if I was needed and I jumped in and I helped, that's what made me valuable and good at my job. And it was just like not sustainable. But I tied so much of my self-esteem to being the hero that would come along and be like, I got you. And then eventually I was like, can I hide in a bush? I do not have you.
I relate so much to that, like that idea of tying so much of your self-esteem to work. I think that's really a big part of what can drive the burnout, because then it's really hard to drive the big word, the B word, boundaries. I think I heard that a little bit in what each of you were talking about. Not to armchair diagnose, but you were talking a little bit about what burnout felt like for you. Do you want to talk a little bit about some of the things that maybe led to that burnout, what caused it? I know, Tammy, you were kind of getting into it, and it was that always on feeling. Do you want to maybe expand a little bit more, and then we can kind of go back to Cortney and Tony of what really led to that burnout for you?
I think it was, for me, being in that kind of corporate-y culture and like bringing up my, like, these are my issues, these are the things I'm having problems with, like producing work that wasn't really going anywhere, just like spending 3 to 6 months on something that ended up, oh, we don't need this anymore, and talking about that and like sharing my feelings about how that was really hard to do. But then it just nothing changed, nothing happened, and that was frustrating, and that just kept happening. And I think, what was the second half of that? ADHD.
No, just thinking about some of the things that led to the burnout, and if boundaries perhaps was part
also
of the
being
issue.
like with my coworkers not feeling able to like share like the struggle, or like maybe nobody, it felt like nobody was listening, and so then it got harder and harder to share. That was a big factor, I think, and it doesn't matter what I say, it doesn't matter,
Why bother doing it then?
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
Yep.
I think for me, it was kind of like I said, it was like a slow creeping thing. And I had started a job. We were in an agency, and we had a client. And the best way that I could describe the work was constant dumpster fire. And it's glib, but it was 10 months of putting out fires, like literally like every day, like fixing a thing. And then like as we were working on that, something else happens. So then you get pulled off, and that's like, what's my priority? So yeah, I think it kind of thinking about like what the root cause was. I do think it was boundaries of the client not respecting our boundaries of us needing to get other things done besides just the fire of the day.
Yeah, that makes me think of, I decided that I came up with this, but maybe I heard it somewhere, I don't know. But this idea of, I call it vendor abuse. Like, those of you who work in a agency setting might relate to the idea of when a certain type of client realizes that you need them more than they need you, kind of a thing, and then they hold you hostage, and they look at it like when I say jump, you need to say how high, otherwise you are like not doing what I need, and you're not a good partner, and I'm gonna go find somebody else who will pick up the phone when I need someone, and that is just like an unsustainable relationship to begin with, for reasons that are outside of burnout, but also your people do burn out underneath those conditions because of, like Tony was saying, just the feeling of a constant dumpster fire, I think comes from, when a client is not willing to abide by how you do business, or you are not willing to uphold your own boundaries and standards of how you want to do business because this client is like that.
It's interesting. I'm a hypothesizer by nature, and I was listening and I was like, okay, maybe it's startups, maybe it's corporate, maybe it's agency, but it sounds like we have quite a gamut here, and the problems are the same in many different types of organizations. And it doesn't sound like it's the organization itself, it's the relationship between the person doing the work, and then the work and to the people around you. But I am curious to know, in these different types of organizations, did you feel like your organization was supportive when you were going through this burnout experience?
No. No, I feel like I was trying to be pretty open, and it was hard to be, and so then it just got harder and harder. And I think, like, at that point, I didn't really realize how hard it was getting to be for me. Like, I looking back, I'm like, oh yeah, that was not healthy. That wasn't good. Now, but I think in that moment, all I could do was, like, I felt like I was trying to be open, and all I got back was sort of, well, you need to do better, and just not like listening.
Nice.
Like, what do I do?
Yeah, I feel like I had got pretty good support from my employer, and it kind of got to, like, my employer was on my side, but yet the client was still doing things that were causing dumpster fires, and it was sort of like, it got down to, like, jockeying of, like, the contract and the statement of work and what you have or have not delivered in the last 10 months. So it's tough when you're hired as an employee in an agency specifically for that client if you're being abused by that client.
Yeah, and I would say that my employer was simultaneously supportive and not supportive in that I was invited to no longer work there, but that ended up honestly being what helped me come back from it, was not working there anymore and having some forced time to regroup and not have to continuously have my nervous system throttled with that, state of high alert. So at the time, being let go was like tragic, but I now look back on it and feel like I want to go give some high fives. That was a huge favor.
So you left your situation that you were feeling burned out in. Tony, you did too, right?
Yep. Yeah. And this also kind of gets into like how you know you're burning out.
Yeah.
The big one for me was I had stepped in for a coworker that had gone on vacation, and then he came back, and I went on vacation for 2 weeks, and I got back, and it didn't help. Like you'd think like a 2-week vacation would help a little bit, but if the situation that you're in doesn't change, you're just jumping back into the bad situation. And I mean, it got to the point where it was like I had to make a call of like, what is my boundary? Like, where do I draw the line of like just constant distraction and whatever from the client? And it's like I realized I didn't have that boundary set, and I was like, I'm just gonna make the call. Like I'm done. Like I'm out. And I've been unemployed for 3 months, and it's been fine.
So is there a way to solve burnout without leaving the job? Do you guys think?
I would say it depends on the source of the burnout, and whether it's changeable. I think, like I was saying, some part of my burnout was my own personal like hero syndrome, and like I would also say I had a bit of imposter syndrome at the same time. So like I'll swoop in and help you all out, and also, I don't know if I'm qualified to be doing this or having this conversation, or and the more burned out I was, the more I felt like, I don't know how to do that. And I think it was hard for me to recognize that that's what was going on, and that I actually am very good at my job and I could handle these things. But the more burnt out I was, the more I thought I could not handle it. And so there's this big part of it, in my opinion, that is recognizing what's happening when it's happening, and ideally before it's happening, before the flame is totally out. And I think you start having signs of that along the way, where you feel you feel exhausted, and like kind of dead inside, and I think that piece of like, I can't do this. Like I started researching, like it's like, I just want to go pour whiskey drinks all day. How much do they make? Would they hire me with no experience? Because that sounds great. And but like those, I think those are all signs that something's not right.
Courtney, did you stay at your job that you were feeling burned out by?
No. I think that was really hard to what Tammy said, just about like the day that we had the discussion of like, okay, your contract's coming up, like it's time to renew, and it was just like they weren't really feeling it, and I was like, I'm not really feeling it, and then it was like, all right, let's just not continue it. And then like literally after that call, it was just like, yes, like the whole like everything, like it just got like all of a sudden 50% better, just like knowing that I didn't have to like keep doing it, even though I could have decided that, I think, the whole time or all along, but I just didn't really feel like I could have.
Isn't it nice just being able to walk away like that though?
Yeah,
like
right.
Like jobs should have that, right? You should have a check-in where you're like, are you feeling it? No, not really. And you can like just quit like a full-time job and not have it be this big production, right?
Right.
It's
Yeah,
like
it felt
the
very,
conscious uncoupling, right? That's what.
yeah, like very trapping before that, or like I was trapped and I didn't have a decision, or I couldn't, like I have to make money, I have to like still live, I have like people to support and things that I need money to live. And so it felt very much so like, even though I could have made that decision, I couldn't, because what else would I do? Then I would be more stressed because I'd have to figure out the next thing. And I think that in that moment, I wasn't thinking about all that stuff. It was just like, oh, all right. And then I was able to then think like, oh, I'll just figure it out. Like I always figure it out. I can do this. And so dropping like the stress of the job almost opened up a lot more just pathways in my brain of thinking, okay, here's the next step now.
So then what strategies did you guys take into your next opportunities to make sure that you didn't burn out the same way again?
I don't know yet because I haven't started my journey.
Tony's like, that's why I'm on this panel. You guys are supposed to tell me.
I've taken the 3 months to make specific changes. This is going to be highly unpopular in this room, but I basically quit caffeine. Gasp, right? Right. Everybody leaves. Just like exercise, all this stuff that you can't just you don't think about doing. You're just like, oh, I'm too busy to do, like exercising, bike riding, stuff like that. I kind of also had the same thing of like, okay, if I quit tech, like what the heck do I do? Do I go become like a park ranger or something like that? And it does sound nice, doesn't it? And yeah, no, it's you have to be able to think about why you're burned out, what's causing it. It's not like, oh, I'm too busy. Why am I too busy? Like maybe I don't set boundaries, or the industry that I'm in, or something like that. You have to be able to analyze it. And for me, it was quit the job so I didn't have all this other incoming at my mental health. But it's definitely helped. Mindful meditation has also helped me quite a bit also.
Yeah, I think self-care, thinking about the idea of self-care. I don't want to say like believe in it before it started becoming popular. It was just like, oh, it's just this thing. But then when I started actually understanding what it meant and like doing the things like, oh, I can spend money on myself to like do something I like to do. What? And once I started actually practicing that and doing it, it was just like, oh, that made me feel really good. Like I'm glad I spent that $100 on getting my hair done or whatever it was, because I just wouldn't like take the time or spend the money or think that I could do that for myself. It was always thinking about everyone else or thinking about the work that I'm doing, like making the time for that kind of thing just felt very impossible, or like I felt guilty doing it. And making the time for therapy and spending the time actually going to appointments and talking through some of that stuff, I learned a lot just about what I was doing and what I didn't need to feel so like guilty for, what I could be doing to spend time on myself that didn't take money or didn't like, it was just like, you just need to spend 10 minutes, trying to meditate or doing breathing exercises. And then all of a sudden it's like, oh yeah, this isn't so bad. Like, yeah, I think self-care, everyone, do it.
My partner suggested that I see a career coach, and I was like, I don't want to do that. My career, I did find a career coach though. She was marvelous. And she helped me really check some of those stories I had about how I delivered value in the workplace. It didn't have to be this always available thing and picking up the phone after hours and this sort of thing. And one thing she challenged me to do pretty early on was, she's like, just take 1 week and work 40 hours and set the boundaries you need to set in order to work 40 hours. And that was really hard for me to do. And in the end, no one even noticed. Like, no one was like, where were you? How come you didn't, or why are you pushing back so much? No one has ever said anything to me ever about setting those boundaries. And so I also think the other thing that my coach helped me with was building up my confidence and helping me see my unique abilities in the workplace so that I wouldn't feel so threatened and like I needed to fall back on old habits of working too much and such, because I had this unique contribution that I did offer. And I'm shocked that it was so hard for me to figure that out about myself. I needed that help. I needed somebody who is not my employer, but standing there objectively and helping talk me through. It seems like that's a really valuable thing that you're able to offer, and helping me see that. And so I love the experience of seeing a coach so much that I am now working on my own coaching license. And so I highly recommend.
Yeah, I had a similar experience. I realized that there was a difference for me between burnout and exhaustion. And the difference was that you can rest when you're exhausted and then you feel better. And when you're burned out and you rest, you don't, which is what you were talking about with your vacation. And the difference for me is if I feel like what I'm doing matters, then I am tired, but I'm still excited to do it. And if I'm burned out, then I'm tired and I never want to do it again. And I had this coaching framework that helped me so much, and it was so simple, and it was just making 4 separate lists that were, what are you good at? What do you like doing? What can you get paid to do? And what does the world need more of? And just make 4 separate lists, and then find the intersection, what appears on multiple lists, and then do that. And that's literally helped me to get to the job that I'm in now. And I am so busy and so tired right now. And I've been complaining all week about how ironic it is that I'm moderating a panel on burnout on my day off. But I actually love my job so much that I don't feel burned out. I just feel tired. And that's different for me from the jobs that I've had previously, where I was sitting in my car I don't want to go into the office right now. I literally would rather go home and just stare at the wall. So I do think there's an actual difference.
There's a sign for you right there.
Yeah, totally. Also, we like to say, to your point about you can drop boundaries and people might not even notice, we like to say there's no such thing as a podcast emergency. Although I think, I know, I was going to say, I think we tempt fate by saying that. So one more question I want to ask you guys, and then I'm going to try and open it up to the audience, hopefully for some questions. The pandemic, we haven't talked, you guys have alluded to a little bit. I think that the question of remote work comes up a lot when we think about burnout. I would love to hear your thoughts on whether remote work helped your burnout, made it worse. Some people feel like it helped because they didn't have commute time or they didn't have to be in the office. Some people were like, all boundaries have now been erased. My work is my home and everything else. I would love to hear your thoughts.
For me, from my experience, I don't think it made a difference. I had been a remote worker since 2007, and when the pandemic hit, my wife and I are both introverts. So when the pandemic hit and everything closed down, we were like, yes, nothing, finally people will see how I live. Right. In a good way, right? But maybe it did in a way where it was people who didn't have the experience working remotely and maybe working in a very organized way or non-interruptive way. Now suddenly everybody's on Slack and everybody can just instant message each other and get the answer that they want regardless of what you're doing, right? You don't have a door of an office that you can close anymore. The advantage that I had when I was remote but other people weren't was I could hide online, right, and get work done. But now everybody's on Slack, so it maybe it does just get down to the boundaries.
Yeah, I think a big one where I was working, it was very much so the upper management didn't really understand working remote, and so going remote meant more meetings all the time, and there were just constant meetings on the calendar, and it felt like I had less time to do the work that I was trying to get done and more time in meetings that felt really pointless. And there were 40 people in some of these meetings for half the day, and it was just, I think that really started snowballing into I don't have time to do the work that I was hired to do. And then on top of them not using half the work that I was doing anyways, and then it would go 3 months and we would say, okay, yeah, we're getting too many meetings. Let's get rid of some of these meetings on the calendar. we'd get rid of them, and then 1 week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks later, it's just meetings popping up again and again. And so it was just like, all of a sudden I'm in 20 hours of meetings a week and having no focus time because it's every half hour. There's a half hour break, then an hour meeting, hour meeting. So like the day is just kind of shot, but then feeling like I need to do the work that I need to do after actual working hours, because that's the only time I get to like do any sort of development and like focus time to work on some of the like prototyping that I needed to do. So yeah, I think it was harder in that sense going remote. I think when upper management and just the people kind of managing the project don't really understand how remote work should happen. You can share.
Personally, I love working remotely, but I can very much relate to those who are struggling with it. Specifically, your description of it. I feel like we need a whole other panel about meetings and just like why have a meeting? What is a good meeting? So many meetings are definitely a waste of time, and it could make a huge difference to remote work if we could all kind of collectively agree on how to have a good meeting and when you should cancel a meeting. But that's a different topic. Yeah. So in terms of contributing to burnout, I'll just say, I don't know if any of you saw Mono made a animated cartoon like early in the pandemic about how you can't shut down, and it was just a person like working at a computer. They walked away, and then they're like walking back and forth, and their computer is making that slack noise over and over again, and they're like trying to make dinner and they're trying to do laundry or whatever, and it just, the slack noise gets more and more and more intense, and the person doesn't go to the computer, but they get more and more stressed out. That's how I think of the remote work and burnout kind of paradigm.
Before we turn it over to the audience, do any of you guys have any last things you'd like to share before? Any last words of wisdom?
I don't think so. I say let's ask some questions.
All right. Oh, good. Okay.
I could go run a mic.
Okay, great.
Well, before I even ask a question, just want to recognize it was very courageous for you guys to get up there, and that's a vulnerable
Thank
thing.
you.
Extremely courageous, and that is super, super powerful to do that. You said the quiet part out loud. Everybody here is thinking that. So, but I do have a question, and that is, now that you've cured yourself of burnout, each of you, or at least you've got a little better advantage on it, how do you plan to keep it at bay? And I'd love to hear all three of your ideas. How do you plan to never step into the burnout bucket again? That would be great to hear.
I think boundaries, as we kind of touched on, just being really aware and now understanding kind of how I felt in the thick of it, and looking back and just knowing kind of, okay, that was probably a warning sign. I didn't want to go to meetings. I stopped going to meetings. I didn't really care about the work I was producing. And when I would, like, if I start feeling that again, that would be like, okay, I need to start doing, some of these self-care things. I need to just take a minute and stop and think about what I'm actually working on. Is this valuable? Is this what I want to be doing? And ask those questions ahead of time before I get to that point.
Yeah, so I think my third panel is going to be about how, because I'm in, operations and project management, and it's about how to create focus so that people can actually do the work. And I am working really hard to be able to do that for myself, but in my role, I have a lot of control over how my teams work, and I just don't think work needs to be the way it is, where you have 10 meetings scheduled back to back to back, and then now you have to take your personal time to do the work. I have a lot of hot takes on this topic, but the number one thing that I would say to help with burnout is to know your value and that you are valuable and you do contribute things that don't require you to sacrifice your well-being.
I'm going to be very strategic about the next jobs I take.
Yeah, I would echo what Tony just said. One thing that I've found to be so important is working at places where the leadership is both inspiring and clear about what it is that we're there to do. I think so much of the burnout happens when you are corporately or organizationally chasing things and you don't know why you're doing it. And then you're just like running in circles and you're like, why am I here? Why am I doing this? And it's just so hard to get yourself motivated in that situation. So it goes back to the idea that I think both Tammy and I have talked about a little bit of this, like what you're doing needs to feel like it matters. But I think a lot of that tone comes from the leadership and the clarity of the goals and the values that they're setting for the organization.
That was my question, is where was leadership here? Why was there not, maybe you had open communication, sometimes afraid to have that open communication, but leadership should be fostering that open communication.
Would you mind repeating that?
I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. It's just for the recording. We want to make sure we get it on the mic.
So I was just wondering, as you were all speaking about leadership, and where was that? Was there a gap there in open communication? Leadership should be fostering open communication. Did you ever feel that? And I know that you spoke about that leadership wasn't kind of there for you, but maybe as you're going forward, that next conversation with a new potential employer is, tell me how do you foster your open communication, and I basically, it sounds like there's a gap here with all of your stories about where that leadership role kind of failed.
Yes. Yeah. What could the leadership have done to support us?
I think there's definitely some part of it, like I was saying, about recognizing how we work. And I think there's like a general acceptance that we don't have to have that, and that general acceptance is that, our schedules are what they are. This is what it means to work. They don't call it work for no reason, that whole thing, right? But like, if you actually want the value delivered from the team that you have, there's research that supports that, like, if you can maintain the container of, say, 40 hours a week and the amount of work that fits into 40 hours a week, that includes meetings, whatever meetings you need to do, and whatever work you need to do and keep it in 40 hours a week, your teams will actually get more done when they're not drowning going, how am I going to get all this work done? When they're like, yep, I can do it. I've got the time. I've got the focus. I know what I'm supposed to do. That should be our goal rather than maintaining the chaos of how we do work today.
Agreed.
Thank you so much. The question I had was, how do you know that your burnout is caused by just your job versus your career? I'm just having a little bit of a difficult time trying to determine if this is just the way the tech industry is and maybe that's not for me, or is it just the company that I'm at or the team that I'm on?
I know mine was caused by more than just my job, all happening at the same, like personal life, going through a divorce, remodeling a super old farmhouse for like 5+ years. Everything just kind of all at once. And so I think normally I had like my career, my job is like something I love doing and something I just was super excited to like just do all week. And when that started turning just extremely difficult and started being like, I don't want to do this, on top of like everything else turning into that, it was just everything just felt extremely difficult, and I think it kind of all piled on top of itself and made things harder. And so I think it's probably very situational and very person to person, but I know if it was just my job, I think I still would have felt very much so the way I did, but it wouldn't have been so severe. And so, yeah, I don't know if anyone has personal experience on top of job
I'd say
stuff.
talk to other people that do your job, but in different companies.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Yeah, I heard this definition of burnout that was caring too much for too long. And so when I really think about that, if I can break down first, what is caring too much? Where is that line? But then what do I actually want to care about? Do you want to care about the stuff that you do at work? And if the answer is no, there's some insight and wisdom there to dig into. But I also, yes, what Tony said, talk to other people who do what you do so you can decide, is it my job or is this just how it is?
For me, it had a lot to do with the structure of the company. Like, I found that I bounced around between like tiny startup, huge corporation, somewhere in between, nonprofit. Like, I tried them all, and then I kind of found where I needed to be. But like, some of those situations did not suit me very well, and there wouldn't have been an industry where I would have done well in a tiny startup. Like, that life led me to burnout because I put too much of myself into it. And I think that would have happened whether it was a food startup or a tech startup. So I do think there are some situations that might sort of predispose you potentially to it, or there might be team structures that set you up for failure, or leadership structures. But it also could be like, I mean, what do they say? Like, people leave bad bosses, not bad jobs, that kind of thing. There's interpersonal issues that can also exacerbate the problem and that sort of thing too. We probably have time for one more question. Yes.
So I've heard that some people describe that there's a relationship between burnout and neurodivergence. And I just wanted to get your opinion on, have you experienced any of that, or have you heard that, and what your advice might be on that?
I was diagnosed with ADHD a couple years back, and that was definitely an eye-opener for me, just knowing how I operated at past jobs and how I just do my work and how I can get it done in general. And so to me, that's very relatable. And as soon as I just started reading about it and learning more about myself and learning more about what I do and making connections, it was all very like wiping all the dirt off a window and being able to see clearly, and now like, oh, this is why I do all these things this way. And then it set myself up for being able to help myself do, tasks in my job better, like knowing what I need, if I need more structure and, just more focus time, or it was really helpful. And so I can't speak for everyone, but that has been my experience. I don't know if either of you have.
I don't have any experience. I'm not diagnosed with anything really officially, so I really don't know.
All right, I think we are at time, but thank you all so much for being here. We really appreciate it, and I hope this helps anyone who's feeling burned out. You're not alone.
You're not alone. Yes.
No.